Hi, I'm Lydia Orange and I'm an artist. I'm a fine art artist and printmaker, so I work in several different mediums, but this year I've been working specifically with ink and botanical printmaking. And this is such a great process, and I just wanted to make it very easy and accessible for anyone who wants to learn. So this course is completely free, and I will talk you through the materials that you need and walk you through the whole process step by step. So please come and join me. So botanical printmaking is a really old form of art. It dates back to the 15th and 16th century, when people used to use it to record and identify different leaves and plants for medicinal and culinary purposes. And the reason why I love it so much is because it allows you to capture the intricacies and the details of nature. And that leaf or flower will die one day, and it won't be around for very long. So it's a great way for you to actually be able to record it and remember, and you will have that forever. So I love the idea that you can use it as a way to capture a memory. So if you have like a holiday that you loved and you picked some wildflowers, and that holiday meant a lot to you, so you want to remember it, you could print those wildflowers and then have it in your house forever. Or maybe you went to a wedding and you loved the flowers on the table and you want to take them home and print them, and you could even give them to the bride and groom as a present. Yeah, it's just such a nice way of remembering things. So yeah, let's get started, and I will talk you through materials now. They're all very affordable, so I'll put a little list of them, and I'm also going to make a PDF for anyone who wants this written down as well. So let's start by looking at materials. This is everything that I would use in a printing session, and they're all very affordable, very easy to get hold of, either online or in a local art shop. And I will put links up to everything that I use. So these rollers are very standard. They're hard rollers. You can get spongy ones as well. Just depends on how much you want to spend, really. But when you're starting out, these basic rollers are absolutely fine. You can get them for under a tenner, and I use a small one or a big one depending on the type of leaf or flower I'm using. These two are different types of inks. So the Versacraft is a water-based ink, and it's definitely the easier one to use out of the two. There's a place for both, for sure, but when you're starting out, I would say this is the best one to use. But it doesn't have as much depth as this one. So this is the Cranfield Calico Safe Wash Relief ink, and it has more depth on the page when you print, and looks nicer. It's harder to handle, but if you have your baby wipes, you'll be absolutely fine. But what I find is the Versacraft, when I've got my hands dirty, comes off really quickly with a baby wipe, whereas you're there for a bit longer trying to clean your hands with this ink. Harder to cover your tracks and not to get smudges all over your paper. But if you're careful, then it's absolutely fine. And yeah, so this is my favourite, definitely. And I'll be using this one today. Tweezers are really handy. So when you have a very inky stem and you're trying to move a leaf from one place to another, these are really handy to have nearby, so you don't get your hands covered, or you don't get smudges on the page from your hands, making sure that these are clean as you go. Perspex glass is really handy to have. So you can use normal glass, but the only thing with that is that you can cut your fingers on the corners, so you'd want to put tape on the edge. But when you have Perspex glass, you don't really need to do that. That's why I like it. It's just very basic and cheap. And yeah, that's where you would roll the ink on. This is my favourite paper to use. It's Daler-Rowney Smooth Heavyweight Paper A4, and you can get it for under a tenner, and it is a nice quality because it has a smooth finish, so the ink can sit on top, but actually it allows it to sink in as well, so it has a really good balance between the both, and it's 220 GSM, so it's a good heavy paper, but not too heavy. So I would recommend this one, but you can use any paper you want. You can experiment with copy paper or the pages of a book if you want to be doing something a bit more adventurous, or music paper is always really interesting. So yeah, experiment, see what you like best, but this is my favourite one. And lastly, some tear off palette paper. You don't have to use this, you can use any paper, any scrap paper, and it's just to put all of your inky flowers and your rollers down in between your printing sessions so you don't get ink everywhere, and then you can fold this up and then throw it away. So it just makes life really easy. So for today we'll just be looking at leaves, and I'll do a flower tutorial in the future, but leaves are slightly easier to handle, so let's start by looking at them. So let's move on to talking about which leaves and grasses to use. One of my favourite things to use at the moment is a maple leaf. It's really easy to handle, and it captures loads of detail, and as you can see, this one has some holes where someone's had some dinner, and I find that comes out really nicely, adds some interest into the print, so I tend to go for things that have a bit more interest in them, but if you wanted a perfect one, you could also go for a perfect little maple leaf which has had no one attack it. And then we have here two different types of hydrangea leaves. So these are other ones that I would definitely recommend when you're starting out, because they're, again, really easy to handle and they make really beautiful results. This one is obviously much rounder and just creates a very satisfying shape. Yeah, it's really beautiful, as you can see, and very simple. And this one this comes from just a hydrangea bush. This one, sorry, came from a climbing hydrangea, and this is just a hydrangea bush. And this is a dogwood. So dogwood creates a very delicate finish. The veins are really thin, and it just makes something really beautiful on the page, and I'll show you how it turns out later. Last leaf is the horse chestnut. So I have one of these growing in my garden. I've put it in a pot. It's not growing in the ground because I think it would destroy the foundations of my house, but I'm growing it in a pot because I love printing with these leaves and they come out so well. And lastly, we have some grasses. Now these have become, I think, my favourite things to use of all, because they just come out so well, and they can be a bit tricky to handle, but actually when you get used to them, they do make the best results. Now these two are fresh. I just picked them from my garden. This one is pressed, and the reason why I pressed this one is because it was very bushy and would have been a little bit difficult to actually press and would have made a big bump on the page, which I'll explain later. So I pressed it for a couple of days, and so it's going to be much easier to use now. This one is an example of possibly one not to use because it's so thick. You can give it a go, but this will make that bump in the page and make it harder to press. So that's an example of one that might be a bit trickier to use. You can give it a go, for sure, but just expect that it might be harder. This one's really good to use. It's just a very simple grass that can be flattened. It's going to get messy. As you can see, it's going to shed. So I would print with the grasses last so that they don't completely cover your ink station. So that is all of the leaves we're going to look at today. We won't necessarily print with all of them. I just wanted to show you the really good options when you are starting out. And yeah, now let's move on to printing with some of them. Now we have our materials and we know which leaves we're using. Let's start printing. So what I've done here is I have cut up some paper from that pad that I showed you earlier, from the heavyweight Daleroni paper, and I have cut it up in half so that I have A5, and I have 10 A5 pieces here because I have used 5 pieces, cut them in half obviously, but the reason for that is I'm doing 5 prints today, but what I'm doing is I'm using the front and the back of the leaf to print. So what you do is you place a leaf down on the paper like this, and then you place another piece on top so that you get 2 prints. It will make sense when we go through the process. But what you need is you need to, if you're using A5, you need to have an A4 and cut it in half. Or whatever paper you're using, you just need a front and a back so that you can get the 2 prints out of it. So I've cut these really carefully. I've used a ruler because when I cut these and when I make these and sell them, obviously I want them to be straight so that people can frame them a lot easier and not have wonky lines. But yeah, so that is what is going on here. So we have our paper. We're going to move this out the way so that it's away from the ink so that it doesn't accidentally get any on it. We've got the Perspex glass. We have, I'm using the smaller roller, and I'm going to use the oil-based ink for this session. Now, something I wanted to show you was over here to the right of my printing station, I have the tear off palette paper and baby wipes ready to go, and the other roller. So this is a space that you'll use to dump all of the very inky things, and you'll be really grateful that it's there so that you don't get in a bit of a pickle and have ink everywhere. Right, let's go. So taking your ink, taking the lid off, and putting a little blob in the corner. Pop that lid back on so it doesn't go everywhere. And we're going to take the roller and roll some of the ink out onto the glass. What we're looking for when we're doing this is a velvety finish, so that you have not loads and loads of bumps, not too much coverage, and not too thin either. So we're looking for finding a happy place in between. We want the roller to also be completely covered, because this will be one of the ways that we actually cover a leaf. So we use both surfaces to cover the leaves. So you need that roller to be evenly covered as well. I would say we're almost there. I'm going to stop there and see how it's looking. Okay, I would say we are ready to start printing with our first leaf. I'm going to start with a maple leaf and see how we get along with this one. So placing the leaf on top of the ink and just letting it sit right in the middle of where that ink, where you've placed it on the glass, and holding the bottom of the stem with your thumb, we're going to roll that roller over the leaf from top to bottom, really gently at first to get the hang of it, not pressing too hard. But this kind of leaf can actually take quite a lot of the pressure, so yeah, that's why it's good to learn with these ones. It's not like a floppy flower where you have to be super sensitive, but yeah, this one can actually take quite a lot of pressure. And then making sure that you've got some of the stem covered. So now that's got a pretty good even coverage. I'm going to turn it over and do the same on the back. So I'd say this is pretty good to go. Being very gentle, peeling this leaf off, having a look at each side. Now there's a lot more ink on this side than there is on this side, but that's okay because both, it means that you'll get two very different looking prints, which is always really interesting. So let's give this one a go with the paper. Putting this glass to one side and pulling in a piece of paper. I'm going to really gently bring this leaf over and place it down, and try and do that with one movement and touching it as little as possible. So I'm going to use my hand on the other side. And once you've placed that down, don't touch it again because you will get smudges in places that you do not want them. Using a baby wipe, washing your hands to make sure that you aren't bringing any ink over into this print in places that, again, you don't want them. And then grabbing the second piece of paper. Something you need to really keep a handle on is which side of the paper is the front and which side is the back, because paper has a tooth in it, and each paper is designed differently to have a different type of quality on top of the paper and a different quality on the back of the paper. Now with this particular paper, it's really hard to tell the difference, especially on camera, but there is a difference, and when you come to print, it won't be the end of the world if you get the wrong side. It will turn out fine, but it will affect the finish ever so slightly. So if it helps to have a little tiny pencil mark, I don't know if you can see that, on the top of the paper so that you know which way around is the top, so that the print is always sitting on that side and not the back. I'm now going to bring this piece of paper over. Again, one movement, definitely not touching it again once it has blazed down. And once that is down, we just take a second to get ourselves ready and then start actually flattening the paper and printing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the side of the palm of my hand to make a little anchor and to hold down the end of the paper, and then use the other side of the palm of my hand to drag upwards. Really important that you try and do this very smoothly, because you don't want double printing, so you don't want the paper to move around as you do this, because then what happens is you get what's called a double print, where the leaf has moved. So I will show you what I mean. Okay, so once you have done that, that takes a bit of practice, but you will get there very quickly. It is not difficult to do. It just is, feeling your way through it. And you might have a few duds along the way where you have moved the paper, but you'll get the feel for it pretty quickly. So now I'm going to lift this paper off. Again, we want to do this very smoothly and not to move the paper around too much. So that is the bottom print, which is very nice. Some detail. That was the side that had less ink on. And this will be the side that has more ink on, so it will be darker. Very gently peeling. Beautiful. Yeah, that is a first attempt at our maple leaf. Give it a go, see how it feels. I'm sure it'll be absolutely beautiful. Maple leaves are really fun to work with, and yeah, good luck. We'll be moving on to the next leaf. Moving along to the horse chestnut. So putting some more ink in the corner. Putting that to one side. And let's roll a little bit more. We don't need too much because it still has quite a lot on it from the maple leaf. I'd say a tiny bit more than that, and then we're good to go. Okay, let's jump in with the horse chestnut leaf. This one, as you can probably see, is a lot more delicate than the maple leaf. So I'm going to be super careful that I don't pull these tiny little leaves off at the bottom. Okie dokie, turning that around. Okay, let's pull this off and see how it turns out. I'm just going to have a little look at the coverage. I think it's okay. We'll give it a go. Pulling that paper over, making sure that it's the correct side, so that this is the top of the paper. Let's put this down. Okay. I'm gonna wash my hands. Okay, now bringing over the second piece of paper. Gently placing it. And then getting ready to press and pull that paper together. So making sure your hands are dry from the baby wipes, they're not covered in loads of ink, and then giving it a go. Moment of truth. Beautiful. And here is the second print. Ooh, very different. Very nice though. So here we have two really different prints of the same leaf. And they turned out nicely. Last but not least, let's have a look at some grasses. So we'll use these two here, and because we're using more than one, so far we've just used a single leaf in the middle of the page, so it hasn't really needed any planning composition wise, because it's pretty straightforward, you know where it's going to go. But when you have more than one, my advice is to plan the composition, because when these guys are covered in ink, you kind of want to know where they're going to land. So let's see, we've got this one here that I've pressed, which is really beautiful. The shape's really nice. I want to put it in the middle as the main feature, and then see how this one gets along, maybe crossing it over, and see how that turns out. So let's give it a go. We'll move these out the way, move the paper out the way, and then start rolling some more ink out. Okie dokie, I think we're good to go. Starting with the main grass, placing it down. Now when you're dealing with grasses, because the little tiny pieces are going to go everywhere, try and be a little bit more sensitive with the roller so you don't lose all of the pieces into the ink and then it's like a naked little stem. Okay, turning it around. I think this one's good to go. So we move this to one side. Bring in that paper. So now what we're going to do is move this to one side. Very gently. Bring your glass back over with the ink and then do the other one. I think we need some more ink because this one's so dry. So we've lost so much of these bits, which I thought would happen, but I still think that this will be a really interesting shape, even though it's really sparse, poor thing, but I think it will still look really nice on the page, so we're going to stick with it. Okay. Okay, let's see how this goes. It could go either way. It's turned out okay. So we've got some little pieces of grass there, and my suggestion is that we don't touch them and that we move them when they're dry, because you could have a little accident, or you could risk it with some tweezers if you wanted to. I personally wouldn't. I would leave it because it's not going to do any harm to take it off later, but it might do harm to take it off now. Last one. Ah, lovely. Oh, there we go, you can see that there. Again, I'm going to leave those little pieces of grass on, apart from that little guy there. Oh, we lost it anyway, that's good, no smudges, phew. So there we go. We have two grasses that have turned out really nicely. And you can see, even though the second grass almost lost all of its grass, the print turned out fine, and it can still be really interesting and beautiful. So yeah, always persevere with these things, just because you never know how it's going to turn out, and sometimes they turn out completely differently to how you imagine them to be. So yeah, that's the grasses. I hope that was a fun process for you. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions, and I'd love to see the work that you made as well and see how you got on. So you can find me on my website, lydiaorangeart.com, and shoot me an email or a message, and yeah, show me your beautiful artwork. I have made a PDF for anyone who prefers to have this written down. You can also find that on my website. So please do like and subscribe for more art videos. I have a newsletter that comes out weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, and it just has new work on it, new updates, things like this course will be on there. So please do follow me on that if you'd like to keep in touch, and have a lovely rest of your day.